React-Native QR code scanner is a library for both Android and iOS that essentially lets you scan for QR codes. In this video, we're going to take a look at installing and getting up and running with them, as well as an example of how to use them in terms of saving stuff to state or even printing out a QR code to an SVG on the app itself. My name's Adrian, and if you like this kind of content and you want to see more like it, hit like and subscribe, and let's just jump right into it. Alright, so let's get started. We'll start by creating React Native as a project by running npx react-native init and the name of our project. In this case, I'm just going to call it QR code test. Let's run that and it'll install all the dependencies that we need to get React Native up and running for iOS in this case. I'll just skip forward to this section once this is all done. Great, with that finished, we can now cd into our project. So let's do that here. We'll just cd into QR code test, and we'll also open up VS Code and we'll browse into the directory, which is just over here. With that done, we can open up a version of the directory using Xcode, and I'm going to run this on a physical device, but I'll also import that so that you guys can see what's going on. So in here, I'm just opening up a new project. We're going to browse into GitHub, go to QR code test to iOS, and we'll select the QR code test.exe workspace. When we open that up, we've got everything here we need to start running this on the iPhone. And I've got the iPhone just over here, but I'll screen share that just now by opening up QuickTime and then just selecting to create a new record session on the phone itself. So let's do that now. There we go. So now you can see my iPhone screen there. That looks good. And in here for Xcode, we're just going to run the project with the initial directory to make sure that it comes up and running. And after that, we'll have a look at installing our first package for the QR code scanner and see if that works. All right, looks like the Metro bundler has launched, and now it's installing the package on my phone. So we're almost there for getting the baseline package up and running. All right, great. So it looks like our package is up and running. If I just test this out on my phone, I can see it's all up and good. So the next thing we can do is have a look at react-native-qrcode-scanner. We're going to install this package and we're going to follow the documentation that they have here in GitHub. Now, if we have a look, like always, the first step will be just simply to install the dependencies. So the first dependency that we need is the one for React Native Camera. So if we take a look at that and have a look, then for this, we have to do a couple of steps here in order to get it up and running. The first thing we have to do is install it. So let's do that to start off with. We'll jump here into VS Code, and in our main directory, we'll open up a new console, and we'll just run the command here for installing React Native-Camera. And then we'll have a look at the requirements. So if you're on Android, you're going to have to make sure that you add this permission line, as well as these ones here if you want to use video for the Android manifest.xml. But we're on iOS in this case. So for iOS, in the info.p list, then we're going to add this description in here in order to add access to the camera. And if we have a look here for more information, please refer to the install guide. Sometimes it's good to have a look if there are additional steps, but it looks like most of these are done automatically now with the latest version of React Native. So that sounds very good to me. So let's jump back into VS Code and see what's going on. So that looks like it's finished. Let's go into the PT list and let's add these two lines in there. So we'll jump into iOS, into our project, and enter to info.plist. And just here, we'll create the new section for accessing the camera. Now for this description, it's usually good to add your own. So testing QR code camera functionality. Great. So we've got that in there now. And we've got the package installed. Let's have a look what else we need to do. So in terms of this, we've got a couple of other things we need to add for the iOS section for info.plist. And this here is to access the photo library and the microphone. So while we might not be using that, I do like to make sure that we're adding in all the dependencies that are required. And in here, we'll jump into VS Code and add those as well. So let's jump back in here and let's add these in here. So we've already got the camera usage, so we can remove this one because having two will be redundant, but the other two we can leave as is. Next, we can have a look at installing the actual dependency. Now, if you're running on Android, then you could probably also add this line in, but we're not doing that. So we're going to go straight to installing the QR code scanner module. Let's jump back into VS Code and we'll just run npm install react-native-qrcode-scanner and we'll save that, and that'll come up in our packages.json in a second. While that's happening in the background, we can see here that we also have to link it. So I'm not too sure yet if we'll need to do this because newer versions of React Native don't usually need linking. So I'm going to test out without linking first to see if that works. And if it doesn't, then we can link it and test it out. Great. So with that installed, let's also jump into our iOS folder and we'll run pod install. You want to do this whenever you install any package because sometimes there are additional pods that need to be generated, and in this case we can see that the react-native-camera pod did need to be installed. We'll browse back into our main directory there, and what we'll do is we'll just rerun Xcode to make sure that our package is building properly for our phone. While that's happening in the background, let's open up our app.js folder. And in here, we'll start to do the first bits of our package for importing it. So we've got React Native Camera here, which can close that off, as well as the install docs and everything else here. And in here, we can take a look at what we do to import it. So here we can see we just import the library by calling it and setting it as a QR code scanner variable. So let's jump here into VS Code and do that. We'll just do it down here. And on top of that, let's have a look at how we can then call it. So the first thing we do is we create the element down here, and we can see that it has a bottom content, a top content, an on read, which I assume is when you actually scan an QR code, this function is launched, and a flash mode. So let's just copy this whole section in to start off with and see how we go. I'm just going to paste this at the very top of our component, just underneath the safe area here, underneath the header as well. Now for this, I'm going to remove the styling because we haven't actually defined any, and I don't think it's that necessary at this stage. And then we can just have a look at running our project, and let's see if that's finished running. So that's still building in the background, but that should be done any second now. All right, so it seems that we're missing one more package, and that is the permissions package right over here. Now, it looks like that's possibly being installed with our QR code scanner, but it hasn't been linked. So it looks like we do have to link these two libraries in, even though we're running the latest version of React Native. And let's just do that over here. We'll run npx react native link, and we'll link the QR code scanner, and then we'll also run React Native link for React Native -permissions. Now, I can't see permissions being installed here. So like I mentioned earlier, it's probably being bundled with this actual module. Let's open up VS Code and add that in as well. And it says here that the dependency hasn't been added, so we're going to have to install this ourselves. It looked like this wasn't actually in the doco. So we'll run yarn add react native permissions. This will install, and once it's installed, we should be able to run cd ios and pod install just to make sure that it is there in our pods. So it looks like that's generating right now. With that generated, we'll have to rerun our package once more in Xcode. So let's do that here. So it says here that in our permissions section, we will need to add this to our pod file. So that's interesting that that wasn't in the doco. Let's have a look what else people are saying. So it looks like this seems to be a similar thing that everyone is getting. So let's jump into our pod file and add this in. Now let's have a look where our permissions are set. So they're right here. And if we take a look at that, permissions path is here. So we're setting the permissions path, and then we're adding in the permission there. So we'll have to rerun those pods by browsing into iOS and running pod install. Once that's done, we'll just rerun our project, and hopefully that should be it. Let's jump back into Xcode and run stop and play again. Oh, that looks like it actually worked. And there. Finally, we have the QR code scanner working, and it looks like it's using the camera module, which is great. It's about time because all those bugs were driving me crazy. Now we can actually have a look at scanning some QR codes and how the functionality of the QR code scanner works. So with this up and running, we're going to test out the QR code functionality. First, we'll turn this component we have here into a class component. So I'm just going to run rnc, and this will create the syntax for us to have a React Native class component ready to go. I'm just going to copy the rest of this syntax into there and delete this old syntax. With that done, let's paste this in here and just save that to make sure it's loading okay. And let me wiggle this little bit so we can reload, and we'll also have to import component from React Native, so let's do that here. Great. So with that done and the QR code scanner working, we'll jump in here and create some state. Now let's create just some basic state of QR code, and this will be an empty string. Then we'll create a function called onRead, and this shall pass in a variable which will set the state. So this dot set state, and we'll just pass in QR will be E. So on here, we can create a function called onRead, which is the functionality for the QR code scanner, and we'll just pass in this dot onRead. Let's apply this, and then with that done, our QR code scanning should be ready to go. We just need to test it out. So let's open up a new window in here, and we'll go create QR code into Google, and we'll just create something simple. So we'll use this, I think this is in the right website. Let's have a look at QR code monkey over here. And with this website, we're gonna just create a simple QR code. This looks like your URL, so I'm just gonna put this in here. And yep, that definitely scanned because my screen vibrated, but nothing happened. So that's because we haven't actually displayed the state. So that might have been useful. I'm just gonna put it here and replace step 1 with the text. So this will be this.state.qrcode. And apply that. So right now it's empty, but if we hover over the QR code here, we can see that it comes out as an object. So that's not good. We're not going to be able to see what it's doing here. But if we have a look at the docker, maybe we can find out what kind of an object it's meant to be creating here. So let's have a look at our docker over here. And if we have a look, we can see that it passes in this e variable, and this e variable isn't defined. So maybe I might just console log it and we'll see what we get. But to do that, I'm going to have to enable debugging on the device. I'm just going to shake it here, enable debugging in Chrome, and open it up here on the console by selecting it. So that looks like it's up and running. And then the next thing we'll do is we'll jump into our code, and instead of setting state, we'll just console log it and save that. With that saved, we'll go back to our web page here, and we'll jump in to create QR code. We'll go to the CodeMonkey website once more. And let's see what happens when we scan over it now. So there we go. We've got our QR code coming into console. We've got some raw data and the data once it's been processed. So we've got that URL there. So it looks like the QR code is definitely working. There's some really cool stuff we can do with this. And what I want to do to start off with is just clean up this component a little bit. So let's remove the header over here. And for this section here, for the rest of the app, let's remove most of it. And we'll just remove most of these views so that we only have the QR code bit. And finally, for the QR code bit, we might want to test out how that's working now that we know the syntax. So the syntax here is e.data, and let's apply this in here and uncomment it and just test that that works properly. So we'll jump in here, we'll scan it, and we can see that the URL is getting picked up. But what I want to do is I want to see if we can capture this QR code on the camera and then create a QR code as an SVG within the application itself, because that would be really cool. So in order to do that, we might install another package. Let's install react-native-qrcode-svg. Now for this package here, let's have a look at the GitHub directory for the install guide. And if we have a look here, it's pretty easy to install. It's literally just installing the package and it should be good to go. So let's jump in and do that now. We'll jump in here and let's copy over the code to install this. We'll use yarn to install it because we're using yarn for everything else, and we'll run yarn add react-native-svg. And then we'll also add react-native-qrcode-svg. Yarn add, there we go. So with those two packages installed, and I don't think we'll need to link it because we'll be using pods, that should be it. So we'll actually just make sure the pods are installed. So we'll browse into CD iOS and do pod install. Make sure that's all good. So that is installing the SVG package there, which I thought it would need to do. And we'll rerun our project. So we'll click stop on Xcode and click start again. Now let's copy over this example. So this example here is just importing the QR code from qrcode-svg and then just using it as a small component. So let's put this in up here. And also let's copy this syntax over here into our component right below the camera. Let's save that. And when our project runs, we'll see if that took effect. All right. So we've got a template QR code there, which is cool. but this is just the value that the QR code is currently preset to. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to this.state.qr. So that's pretty cool. Right now it's got no text input, so we'll just do empty or maybe null. So we can see that it needs data in order to display. So we'll make this a conditional component that only renders if we have data for it. Otherwise it renders null. And let's copy this in, and that should fix it up. So now it's working properly, and let's test out if this works. So we'll jump over here to our QR code on Monkey, and we'll scan it, and there, we've scanned the code, we've got the URL, and we've generated the exact same QR code on our phone, which is really cool. I hope this video gave you a better understanding of QR codes. There's still a lot more to them, and there's lots of functionality you could create in React Native using them. For example, you could have an app which checks for discount vouchers that have a QR code. And when you scan them, they could go to a database, for example, that activate a once only use, so that the next time they're scanned, they could say they've already been used once. Alternatively, you could use them as a membership ID. There's lots of options for it, and hopefully this gives you some inspiration to start using them yourself. I hope you like this kind of content. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.